Count whatever you want.
Okay, now it's go ahead.
Okay. Hey, so we're gonna talk about a few different topics today, and it's either gonna be super fun for you because a lot of this is gonna be technical, or it's gonna be just way over your head. So it's completely fine if it's over your head. The assumption is this group's enjoys nerd stuff and code and talk and tech and all that. So most of today is well, the whole purpose of today is to begin preparing ourselves, you and us, all these big changes that are coming up. And so that's the goal, right? We're not here to reinvent anything or argue or discuss all kinds of crazy things that did or didn't happen or whatever. We're just trying to prepare ourselves for what's already happened um, and what is happening. And so some of you that were in Las Vegas have heard of some of this, and some of you hadn't heard any of this, and that's all right. But I think most of you saw that forum post and that blog post I made about BT Go, BT Central, right? BT self-hosted, all these new things that we're talking about. And so we're going to start this conversation off with this whole BT Central concept. So that's what's on my screen now. In essence, BT Central is going to become the official name for what people have called the control panel, the app builder, the you name it, right? There's all kinds of names that they've used for it. And so its purpose is still the same, to help us make apps and manage the content for those apps and all that kind of stuff. And so the reason that I'm showing you guys some of these screens is because we want to give this to you first on buzztouch.com and not self-hosted to try to break. In other words, we need you guys to try to break this thing when it's on and working. And so the idea is, if you want, and we think you're a good person and you're willing to help us, we'll give you access to it in your account, and it won't be at that stage. It won't be replacing anything in your control panel. It'll just be a link to, hey, try this out, test it, play with it, see what you think, and that'll be kind of a big first for us, going outside, the box and asking for actual criticism in a technical way, And so if you're not interested in trying to actually figure out how it's working in a technical way, it might not be too fun for you to do that, because you really probably won't be able to help us much. There's some usability stuff that all of us can do, and that's fine. But we're really looking for genuine feedback from a technical perspective, and you'll see why that matters here in a minute. So we'll try to give this to everybody first, all you guys, and it'll be basically the software the way it'll be when a new user shows up. It won't have any of your apps in it. It won't have any kind of technical or complexities around, stuff you've already made. And that's an important concept because it's very, very different in the way that this works. And we think it's much, much better. And so we're super excited about that. And so that's kind of the rollout idea for Buzztouch Central. And I think that most of you will understand kind of why we've done it this way, or why we've trying to, the name, we got to come up with a name to try to distinguish what each piece of what we do is. And so many people get confused on what the different parts are. And so that's why we're calling it that. And so I'm going to open up, well, let me just click around here a little bit and show you kind of the fundamental difference. And we're going to talk technically now. If you'll notice the look and the design and all that kind of stuff, it's basically, the same as it's always been in terms of Vegas, right, from Vegas. If you click around in these pages and you look at the content, we are not asking for a new web page, right? This is all what we call Ajaxy. And so this web page right now, I'm on the account index, account.php. All these are still account.php. We're not asking for a bunch of different web pages. We're loading this content dynamically. And we're doing that on purpose because really it's just kind of time that all of this stuff get modernized, right? And part of modernizing this stuff is moving it all to HTML5 and making it just feel better. And so when we open up the project in terms of the self-hosted here in a little bit, I'll show you what I'm talking about. But that's a fundamental change. And for some of you that may not matter, and you'll just be happy that it's fast and quick and awesome and easy to use. And for some of you, it may matter a lot. And the reason it might matter a lot is the way that your self-hosted stuff is organized and put together will be completely different. Completely different. Obviously, there's a lot of concepts that are the same. I mean, you know how we program and you know how everything works. and it's not meant to scare you or intimidate you. It's just better. And there really isn't any way to piece by piece change the current package that we had, like updating it and updating and updating it. And that's part of what took so long. So we just threw it away and said, let's just make this better. And so we kind of had to do that. And so some of the stuff that you can do based on this new modern approach, I'll just give you a simple example of why this is so cool. Let's say that you're managing your assets and you want to upload a bunch of files. Let's say we want to upload, I don't know, 6 PDFs. Right, we can drag and drop these files now, and it'll show us which ones are too big. Right, it'll show us information about these files before we upload them. And so that's important because if you'll notice, let me go back here and show you something while we do our little simultaneous upload. If you'll notice that we've got a maximum file size displayed here and a maximum amount of files you can upload at the same time displayed here. That's an important concept, especially for people who are self-hosting. We hear a lot that people are adding so much data to their control panels that it just gets out of hand. And so user by user now we can control that. So this particular user can only do 10 uploads at a time. So let's say I wanted to do these 10. Right? It's telling me that these 2 are too large because my account won't allow me to upload these massive big files. So I've got to remove these, and then I can do the rest of them. You can see it's simultaneously uploading, which is huge. Right? So drag and drop, bunch of HTML5 stuff, super cool. And if you can imagine now that same idea in other simple little tasks, like if I want to search for images or whatever, it's just ridiculously fast compared to before. Like maybe I don't have any images in here. Hey, what do you know? Let's upload some images. If I go to my little folder full of images here, we'll put these in the images folder. Pretty quick to do 10 files because we can do all that simultaneous stuff.
That's amazingly
Awesome.
fast, especially when you're running the go-to meeting at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's because I didn't mean to get off on that tangent, but we're not executing HTTP posts one after the other. We're doing them all at the same time. And so it's going to take as long as the largest file takes, right? And so that's kind of cool. Let me get rid of that. But if we search now for something called, I don't know, Battleborn, you can see it's just quick because it's Ajaxy. And we're not asking for a new web page. So if you think of that concept and you think about doing things like building a theme for your app, everything becomes more fun, right? So let's say we want to build a theme. We say Sue's theme. We add this thing, and we want to manage that theme and change its background navigation bar color, right? Because it's live, we have now this kind of dynamic view of what all these things should look like when they finally get to the phone. And so we don't have to constantly ask for web pages and constantly refresh things. So that's the fundamental difference between how the new system is working compared to the old system. And I'm going to show you technically now how that's working because it's important. I'm going to open up the BTC directory, which is in essence the self-hosted directory. This is going to be the download for everybody who self-hosts. And don't screenshot it, don't study it. It's likely to change here in the next week or so, or it's just kind of, we're having a conversation about it now. But it looks like these directories are going to be the final directories. You've got account, admin, API, app, download, files, images, includes, everything just like normal. And in each directory, you have one PHP page. That's what we're looking at right now, the account PHP page. Right? Everything in here is this account PHP page. And if we look at that page in an editor, you'll see it's very small. It's very lightweight. That's the whole file. Because everything in here, it's 150 lines long, everything in here is going to load dynamically using HTML5, Ajax, JavaScript, that kind of thing. So the data is no longer part of the web pages. For those of you who've done web developing, you'll kind of know right away what that means. Right? Another way to say that is it's the way it's supposed to be. It should have been that way a long time ago. But a long time ago, when guys like me were programming, we did it differently. And things have evolved and things have matured online, and it's time to modernize that thing. So one web page, and then all these other files are just the HTML for the particular part of the application we're looking at. So if we're looking at the avatar page, then the avatar screen, or the avatar file holds the HTML for that page, but not the PHP, no data. Just JavaScript and HTML. So you might ask then, well, where's it getting the data? In other words, look at the top of any of the files in your current self-hosted install, and you'll have 200 lines of PHP going to the database, generally at the top of the file. And then below that, you'll have all kinds of logic and business rules and all kinds of BS associated with the PHP part. And then you've got HTML below that with PHP intermingled inside of that. And that's just an old way to do it. And so now each of these pages communicates with the API folder, and just like you have now, the only thing using the API folder now in your self-hosted is the phones. The phones contact your API folder for the data, but now the application does too. So for assets, for example, this one index PHP page holds all the functions to support the assets screen. So that would be uploading, deleting, changing, modifying, moving. Everything associated with assets now, in a PHP sense, is API, assets, index.php. So another way to say it is the API is where all of the PHP goes. And that's important. That distinction is important because you might want to use your API, or ours for that matter, outside of this control panel. And that's a bit of a different conversation, but there would be no reason why you wouldn't be able to post information or pull information from your API without ever using the control panel. And again, because its whole purpose is just the structure, just the data, you could absolutely do that. You might want to make an iPhone app that allows people to add things to your control panel, right? You would use your API to do that. So if you wanted to allow somebody to, I don't know, make a new theme, all you'd have to do is look at the API, and you would see that it's got 4 or 5 functions in it. Get a theme, add a theme, right? All the PHP, update a theme, it's all right here. So that, again, is a different conversation, but separating the PHP from the HTML is a huge part of this, a huge part of this. So the performance benefit is huge. The logic and the way that it's organized is better. But we have to ask ourselves, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? And the only thing that I can imagine that's going to be wrong with it is all of us who are used to the other stuff, right? It's going to be a pain in the butt for some people to do this migration thing. So we've done the best we can to allow you to export and import apps from BT Central, which should allow that, should smooth that process a little bit. You'll notice we have things like global assets now and global screens and global themes for user by user. That's completely different. So if you make a theme as a user, now you can use it across all your apps. Or you make a screen as a user, you can use it all across your apps. That's pretty exciting. But that means that there's changes involved, right? And so when we import an app from an old control panel, we have to make sure that the database and the structure of all of its information is in the right place. And so we're hoping to make that a little bit painless, but I do expect a lot of people to struggle with it. I think ultimately if you saw this without ever seeing the old one, you'd be really, really happy. But if you've seen the old one, you're going to think, wow, this is very different. So it's just a balancing act that we're going through, trying to get people to kind of understand that. People in this meeting, everybody who already knows us and everybody we're already friends with. So some other common questions I expect, well, what about our old control panels, right? We get through this testing phase, we turn it on live. The old control panels aren't going away. You guys aren't going to lose that stuff. If you want to use the old control panel to manage some app, go ahead. If you're uncomfortable with migrating stuff or it doesn't work like we expect, we don't want the old one to change. But we do have to understand that at some point you're going to want to do that. At some point, Sharon Henry's saying, oh, pout face. Absolutely, it makes sense. It's frustrating when Xcode changes and when Eclipse changes and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's just kind of part of it. So we have to think about like your apps that are in the wild. If you migrate them, do we have to update them? I mean, that is going to depend on a lot of things. Smug saying this isn't going to be if you like your doctor, you can keep him. That's funny. I thought I would hear, well, how long can you keep the old control panels? You know, we don't know. For you guys, as long as it takes. One of the things we're trying to get away from is there's lots and lots and lots of orphaned apps. We call them orphaned apps that don't have owners anymore, that call on our back end thousands and thousands and thousands of times. And these people in the past made the apps, connected it to us, and then disappeared. Sometimes their apps are, you know, busy, sometimes they're not, but we consider that a problem. You know, we're trying to identify, like, who are these people that are relying on us that don't even show up? You know, who are they? And how can we help them and kind of move them into the future? Because it's not reasonable to have in the App Store for an app in the App Store for a couple of years, forget about it, and then just expect it to work forever. I mean, I think it's fair for us to reach out to those people and say, hey, what do you want to do here? You got to do something. So we want them to be a little modernized, and of course we want to make it better. We want to make it better for them. So that's kind of the BT Central rundown. I'm obviously and intentionally not showing you a lot of stuff. That's on purpose. I'm trying to keep the focus on the things that matter for this meeting, which is what are we going to do about this structure? The structure's changing. I think what people should do is install it on their machine next to their existing install. You don't have to replace what you have. Just make a new directory, call it BT Central, put the new thing in there, make a new empty database, and go for it. It's not going to affect your other one. People oftentimes assume that they have to replace the old one when we update it. You just don't. You just don't have to. And so I expect that to happen a lot. Let's shift this to BT Go a little bit. That's another topic today. I've been hearing a lot about BT Go, which is our iPhone app that's going to be in the App Store soon. We can't launch the new site or BT Central until BT Go is in the App Store. And there's some technical reasons for that. But mostly, we don't want people to come to the new website and, you know, read about something that just doesn't exist, right? That just wouldn't be cool. You know, Tristan, what about Android? That's about the 4,000th time we've heard, what about Android? What about Android? It'll happen, right? When? Who knows? We're not abandoning Android. In fact, Android, we've made a ton of progress on Android in ways that are far better than iOS. And the fundamental reality is very, very few people on our site care about Android. Yes, there's a lot of them in volume, but percentage-wise, it's very low. So we're going where our audience is first, and then we'll do Android second. That's just the way it is. And it's a challenge, I know, and it's not something that we want to like fight about or argue about or whatever. But one of the big differences is when you're in your control panel now building an app in Buzztouch Central, you'll be building it for Android or for iOS. That's a big difference. And that's an improvement, we think. And so when you want to make the Android version of your existing iOS app, or if you want to make the iOS version of your existing Android app, then it's just like before. It's easy. You've already, in essence, made it for both. But the way that the screen reads and the way that the flow feels and the way that it sounds and the way that we talk to users is you're either working on your Android app or you're working on your iOS app. That's kind of a fundamental difference. And this is a perfect example. Look at this theme here. These are obviously iPhone skins, right? Well, if I'm an Android person, that's bogus because I want Android skins, things like this. And so that's a big part of this. So when we talk about BT Go, we're still talking about just iOS. I don't want to. Sue's thinking what I'm thinking about Android, about what we talked about in last night's meeting in terms of the compiling thing. And I don't want to get everybody all freaked out. But in the Android side of things, we're trying to get rid of Eclipse, and we're basically there. And so what I just said was if you make an app in BT Central for Android, you don't need Eclipse anymore because we're going to compile it for you in the cloud and give you an install URL, which is huge. And so it doesn't mean we won't give you the Eclipse project. It doesn't mean that you can't have it, and it doesn't mean that we don't want to encourage you to get it. It just means that Eclipse sucks. It's a horrible IDE full of errors and troubles, and everybody struggles with it, even skilled people. Yeah. And so we just decided, you know what, screw it. We'll run our own compiler. We've got it working pretty well. It's it's quite a bit more challenging than you might think to compile stuff in the cloud and then deliver, right? It's hard, but that's happening, and so that's super cool. There's a little bit of a big question mark around people's plugins. You know, when you add a plugin to the market for Android, and then somebody goes to BT Central, makes an Android app, uses your plugin, and then we have to compile it. There's a potential for some problems. Yeah, Joe, we're delivering the APK, exactly. And so basically we're just going to show somebody an install URL, text it to them or email it to them for their Android project, and share that with your friends, put it on Facebook, do whatever, get my app. Now certainly it's not in the market, it's not a market app. We don't intend on people getting that APK from us and then putting it in the market. There's some technical reasons for that. In theory that would work, but the reality of it is that would be a really, really bad idea as a developer. And I'll give you one example of that as we move. We're going on a little bit of a tangent here, but if I compile an app for you at my house and my garage and my boat or on my back end, and I give it to you, I've signed it, right? I've signed that app. You upload that thing to the App Store, I now kind of own it, right? That's bad. You don't want to have troubles with updating. You don't want to have troubles with all that kind of stuff. We don't want to get in the business of helping people understand, you know, send us your signature key, send us your encrypted this, encrypted that, so we can sign it with your profile. We don't want to get into that. That's not a good idea. We're saying that we'll compile this for you so you can play with it and share it and have fun with it. But if you want to get in Google Play, we still are going to help people do it the right way, do it the Eclipse way. So if that makes any sense to you. Obviously things can change, but that's a huge, huge improvement. Another way to say that is you'll be able to fire up your phone, go to the control panel, build an app, get a message for the install URL, install it, begin playing with it all instantly. And that is huge. And so we expect a lot of creativity to come out of that. We expect to learn a lot about that. And I queried the database the other day, and there's more than 1,300 different Android devices, 1,300 different Android devices contacted our backend last year. Imagine the screen sizes, the operating systems, the keyboard types. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so to make a quality Android app across all the devices is just silly. It's just not a reasonable thing anymore. So what we're hoping to do with BT Central is to just not make that claim. It's like, look, you want to make an Android app for a 4.0 device that's what we call modern? Great. We're cool. But if you're going to make something for some weird Chinese thing that no one in the United States can buy or nobody in Europe can have, or it just doesn't make any sense for us to try to do that. But Android, we're super excited about Android. Super excited. The Smug saying, can somebody please answer their phone and mute them? Somebody's phone's ringing, I guess. What else was I going to talk about?
Well, Chris has a good question. Chris has a good question. If you scroll a little bit up.
Yeah, what's up? Let's find it.
So will it be a different app on your control panel for the different platform, or will it be a switch within that app?
That's a fantastic question. That's a fantastic question. It will be the same app in your control panel, and there'll be an iOS and an Android, quote, version link under it to open the control panel for that version, if that makes any sense. And so we don't want to change. We don't want you to have, if you've got 23 apps in your control panel, and they're both are iOS and Android, you don't want 46 apps. That doesn't make any sense. It's still, in our minds, it's still an app, one app. Technically speaking, it's still an app with all of its data and all of its settings. But in the UI case, the control panel is going to clarify what you're working on. You're working on Android or you're working on iOS, but technically it's still the same project. Hopefully that clears it up. There's just some UI cases there. Because consider, you know, we need to do the same thing with iPad, iPhone, iPad mini, right? There's differences that are important. The data's the same, but the differences are important when you're talking about trying to make something of high quality. You need to know what you're working on. Chris is saying, will we be able to set different screens for different platforms? That's a really good question. Technically, that's not been figured out yet, but we're hoping to get that in there literally in the next couple of days, because mostly that relates to images and layout files. And we can have that conversation at a different time, however, because it's pretty technical. But yes, that's exactly what we want to do. We want you to be able to add arbitrary screen sizes, quote, to support. So if you want to support an Android tablet that's 7 by 10, or if you want an Android tablet that's 4 by 11, really what it comes down to is different artwork for those. And you should be able to add that to your control panel and then upload the art for that stuff. And then plugins is a whole different challenge, but that's why it's complicated. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so we're not going to bite off that thing soon. We're going to stick with what we have now, small and large, get it all going, get it all rolled out, and then kind of deal with that. I saw another question in there about, so if I can use the BT-generated APK file for beta testing an app and then go through the regular steps to upload the completed app to Google Play. I think, Anthony, that would be a great strategy. I think that would be a great strategy. There are cases, many, many, many cases, where Google Play is just not even part of this path we all go down. Think about making an app for 6 people. You don't need Google Play to distribute that app. So in our case, if you just want to send those people your APK URL, that's great. That's great. You can certainly password protect it. You can do things like this. But yeah, the market is, the distribution of your software is kind of a separate, unique challenge, right? We all know that there's making apps, compiling apps, and then distributing apps. And how you make them's got a bunch of questions. How you compile them really has no questions anymore. Apple requires Xcode. Android, there's a couple compilers, but it's pretty easy. And then how you distribute them is another big question mark. And so Google claims, this is a little bit lame, but Google claims that you can distribute apps outside of the market, and you can, but almost all the Android devices now put up a big yellow, ugly warning, are you sure you want to install this software? It can damage your computer. That's kind of bogus, but it's still there, so it's not truly an open distribution method. If Google's going to jump in your customer's face and yell at you and threaten them with, warnings and stuff, I mean, it makes sense that they would do that, but I don't know. It's just kind of ironic. So back to the rollout. So BT Central on our Buzztouch site to you guys first. Get everybody's opinion. Get everybody's 2 cents on that. Get BT Go going because it's related to the. Let me back up. BT Go has to go first. It's connected part of this control panel, so it's got to be there. Control panel for developers, us people who aren't going to, be negatively critical. They're just going to be critical in a helping way. Then the self-hosted, right? The self-hosted panel can be released soon after that. In between that time, now and then, we're going to discover lots of stuff. This thing is, BT Central is what I'm calling aggressively powerful, right? It allows people to do some seriously cool things, but aggressively meaning they're not going to know what the heck they're doing. I think we're going to end up with some interesting stuff. Oh, another thing. Let's talk about this. The plugins. All of the plugins that I made are going to be part of BT Central. They're not going to be even called a plugin. They're just going to be in your control panel. They're going to be more like features, and which allows you to use BT Go, allows you to use, make a simple app without any plugins, this kind of thinking. And the biggest reason that we're doing that is, we think that people get confused on this whole plugin thing. And we think that they should be able to experience something good and fun and simple and cute without installing, downloading plugins, all that kind of stuff. Chris, I'll get to your JSON question here in just a sec. So we think that's a big difference. Secondly, some of the plugins are going to be kind of required to exist in these projects in order to make a lot of these features in Buzztouch Central work. For example, right now you can log in, protect screens with that cheesy little login plugin. There's a registration process now and a registration plugin in essence. And we believe that there's a high percentage of apps that require people to register or to log in right from the beginning, right? And we already know that getting through the registration process is difficult. And so in the core that you get from BT Central, You have the choice, require registration, right? Pretty simple. Yeah, when they register and they become a user in your control panel, now you have a picture of their device in your control panel, and now you can do stuff like drag things over their device and drop it and give them content. One person, right? Or 3 people, because you have made them register. Think of their avatar, think of their picture, think of kicking them out, think of deleting things off their phone. Right? This is all really powerful stuff and super important, and why I say kind of dangerously creative, right? It's kind of gnarly. It's kind of gnarly, but allowing people to register, I think, is fundamental. One, here's something, Sue, you and I haven't even talked about, but let's talk about it in this meeting right now. Big elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about that I'm going to bring up right now. Tabbed apps. Tabbed apps on I'm talking iOS. Tabbed apps on iOS are basically dead, right? That design is 4 or 5 years old, and rarely do you see a quality app anymore come out with tabs across the bottom. Everything's got the hidden menu on the left. Everything's got a better way to navigate. I'm on the fence about our BT Central when it's letting you build apps. If we let people build tabbed apps like we do now, it adds a layer of complexity that's pretty high, technically and from a user experience. Tim's saying, but all my customers want them. Yeah, totally. That's because they're used to it. No, I'm not making a claim here. I'm just saying the facts. And so if you showed them a hidden menu on the left app, you know, maybe they'd be happy, maybe they wouldn't, I don't know. So I'm asking you guys, you know, do we really worry about tabs anymore, or do we just say make them go away? I don't know. It sure would be nice. It sure would be nice if we could just use a hidden menu on the left and have. Now we're talking about the layout. The layout is, it's just much easier in a control panel sense to say, this is your app's menu. What do you want to do with it? Versus all the different tabs and all the different stuff. So believe me, when this rolls out, tabs will be there. I'm not freaking everybody out, but it's just a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I sure wish they could go away. I sure wish they could go away. Brian's saying death to the tabs. Kill. So everybody's saying the same thing. Kill, kill, kill them all. Android put them across the top. And in tablets, they seem to work pretty good, but I don't know. There's a lot of different paradigms, and of course, that's just the latest one, so they'll shift again. But anyway, they got their uses, like Smug's saying. Maybe we can leave it in the panel and not worry about it. Maybe just make it hard to find or not promote it or something. I don't know. It's just a little pet peeve of mine because people misunderstand it. There's a technical.
We could actually have like a plugin, like a variable that the plugin developer would say this one works or does not work on a tabbed app, so that, you know, we still have tabs apps, but then some plugins may or may not work on a tabbed app.
You just nailed it. You just nailed it. There's some technical things that people don't quite understand that are bad about tabs in iOS. In iOS, you instantiate a view controller object for each tab when you create the tab bar. So when your app's created. Well, if you have a 5-tabbed app, and the 3rd tab over is like a really heavy-duty, takes a lot of time, taxing tab to create, well, now it takes longer to do everything, and you're using resources and battery and bandwidth and everything you don't need to use if the user never taps the 3rd tab. So there are ways around that from a perspective on how to build a view controller, but most people don't understand this stuff. And so they're just not as efficient as they could be. They're just not an efficient thing, and so they're designed to separate content. I get that. It's more of a navigational thing. But anyway, we could have the tab conversation. Or maybe I need to put a tabs are dead blog post up there and explain all the technical reasons why you shouldn't be using them. But anyway, that's that. So BTGO.
What about a really nice side menu that replaces the tab menu?
Exactly.
You know, so if the core of the Buzztouch had a very nice side menu that worked just like the tab menu, looked like it, but was in a more modern place, then we still have the ability, and no more ugly, I guess. I know I agree, Andy, but no more ugly, but like something that you just, you know, is really clear. You slide it out, and it's in Android too.
Yeah, but what's ugly right now? We're talking arbitrary, but if you think about your slide out menu, I think you ought to be able to hack that up and tweak it and change it right in the control panel, right? Make it change. I agree 100%. I agree 100%. BTGO uses a tab menu, right? Or not a tab menu, a slide out menu. That's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. But anyway, so I've talked about a lot. I've thrown a lot out there. This structure let me get back to one of Chris's questions. Chris was saying, hey, what about the API and what about the data URLs? So this is a complicated question. Let me go back here. He's saying, and it's a great question, but it's complicated. Chris is saying, Mr. Technical Guy amongst us, he thinks like I think. Let me get through all the tabbed crap here. Okay, here's the chat. Any changes to, as soon as somebody texts it, as soon as somebody chats, it goes out of view. Let me copy it while I can see it. Here we go. Chris is saying, any changes to the JSON in the BT config, or will our existing apps be able to play nice with the new control panel? Fantastic question. So the goal is they should be able to play nice. The goal is. Now, chances are, you know, we'll run into something weird, and that's part of this testing thing as we move from like importing apps. But here's the reality of it. Let's say that you have two things, right? You have a data URL in the control panel, and this provides app data from an API somewhere, BT or self-hosted. And then you have screens that also have data URLs, right? Whatever. We've got kind of two concepts here where Chris's question is going to be applicable. The app itself has kind of an overall data URL. Think of like the report to cloud URL, report to cloud URL, register for push URL, this kind of stuff. So the intention is that stuff will all still work when you migrate it to your new app. And what we'd like to do is when you publish it, you should start changing that stuff to the new one. So, because what will end up happening is you'll end up with two. Your new control panel might be something like this. Buzztouch.com, API, app, command equals register for push. Right? Let's say we have that right here. And you've got the app ID in there. This is just an example. So let's say you have that URL in your control panel for register to push. If you're in BT Central, it's still the URL to this API hasn't changed, right? It's the same for the app. But remember, let's say we have a map screen, and this is buzztouch.com /API/app/ I don't know, get map data or whatever. Just this kind of stuff. Again, won't change. So on our end, we've got this all figured out. But on your end, and you're self-hosted, this is where it starts getting crazy. Because people point to all kinds of random places and files, and the idea is the URL to your app or to your individual assets is entirely up to you, the person self-hosting the control panel. But if you've got an app out there in the wild that's published and you replace your installation with the new installation, there's a pretty good chance you're going to break stuff if you don't know what you're doing, which is why we say just leave it. Get the new one going, get your new app working and tested and cool, and then publish it into the wild. It'll update on everybody's phones, and then eventually throw away the old one or whatever. You want to try to balance that because that's a concern. That's a concern. But it shouldn't break just by itself. It should be fine. But there's a potential for it to break because you're not sure what you're pointing at, if that makes any sense. Hopefully that kind of clarified it. One thing, let's look at this too. This is an important concept. Back to the app project. Look in the files directory. Today you have applications and no users. I'm talking files now. So users now have their own directory and applications have their own directory. There are none in this example. And that's an important concept. The reason that this doesn't say applications anymore, like it used to say, like this, is because if you know Linux, there's a maximum number of subdirectories you can put in one folder. It's big, but people are reaching it. So if you change it with a date on it, apps, something like that, June 14, you might want to later come back, create apps, July 14, go to your config panel or your config file and change the application directory, and now all the new apps will be in here. Right? So you can start to separate this stuff. Same thing with users. It just makes for a better structure and a little more flexible. The database itself now has some totally different settings in terms of columns and fields, and it's different. It's just better. It's way more flexible. And so that import process is a matter of filling out the right fields for the right people. Like here's a perfect example. Time zone, right? Changing your date format to your European, right? That wasn't possible in the old control panel because the database isn't aware of the fact that you're not in the US and you don't like looking at the dates that way. So it's logical now that the database would need to know what's your time zone format and how do you like looking at hours, and Kitsy's going, yay! I'm going, you guys are whack in the way that you look at dates. So Miguel, this is for you. Day, month, year, like this, 25/6/14, dude, that is not a date. That is like a crazy weird typo just for everybody who likes dates that way. That is not a date. I know you Portuguese people are like day first then month or what. That's just jacked. So, but anyway, if you want to break your date and lay it out like a crazy person, you're welcome to do that. So that's how that works. Smug saying Euro. I know, it's crazy. It's only USA who does it wrong. I know, that's because this is America. Ask Will Ferrell. This is America. We do all kinds of stuff wrong. But anyways, so is BT Central mobile friendly, Niraj? I would say no. I would say no. This thing's. I've tested it on my device. It's just not built for mobile. Mobile, web-based mobile BT Central, I don't think is a good call. I think we'd like to have a BT Central mobile app, right? That'd be way better. But trying to do all this stuff in a browsery-based way, just not worth it at this point. Yeah, we're wrong. What you gonna do about it? Ha! Exactly. Tim, me and you, dude, we're ganging up. We got NASCAR and gallon-sized Pepsis at the burger joint. We are good. Anyways, I think that's it. We've gone 45 minutes. Let's take some more questions and try to keep them on track. BT Central, testing, self-hosted, these are the topics. Yeah. Anybody else want to throw stuff out there? Google Glass? Yeah, exactly.
Well, how can we help with testing, David?
So the first thing that we're going to do today, there's not a whole lot of testing that we can do, that you guys can do. And I'm not trying to sound secretive or cryptic or whatever, but until you have BT Go in your hand, we're wasting our time, really. Because, I don't know, maybe we're not wasting our time, but I don't want people to have the self-hosted stuff until we've tested it on our site. And I don't want to put it on our site until we have BT Go, because it's all part of it. Right? When you make stuff in BT Go, it's in BT Central. It shows up. That's the idea. And so we need to get that kind of stuff going on. Sherry, can you describe what a BT Go app might look like? It looks like that screenshot on there's two ways to look at it. Let me I was short there, and I'll back up and say sorry. There's two different kinds of ways to look at BT Go. If you use one of the little widgets and you just create a simple little widget and you're not really making an app, right? We've all seen the little list of little widgets, photo collector, map check-in screen, that kind of stuff. That's basically a one-screen app. So it'll look like that one screen. Put the code in, take a picture, I get an email. Simple. If you make an app like you and I understand it, Sherry, it'll look like just the way that all your apps look now. You go to BT Go, you put your code in, and your app will show up. Right? That's the reason that this is taking so long, because Apple's pissed off about this. So it's a matter of perspective. We think we're helping Apple, and Apple's like, dude, you can't make apps with an app. I'm like, yeah, you can. Look, and they get pissed. So it's just a matter of trying to balance all this different kind of stuff. But Niraj, can you share things that Apple is asking of you? Sure. I'm not going against any kind of agreement that I've made with them. They're not asking of me anything, really. They're telling me that this is a little too aggressive and a little too disruptive, and it's declined. It's rejected. So we change it and tweak it and water it down and take things away and send it back to them and get some other guy on the phone, and this is on the phone, and then we go from there. So they're frustrated with lots and lots and lots of people like us, and frankly, people like you too. Right? I'm not trying to be disrespectful here, but there's different reasons why they're frustrated with different types of people. So people like us cause Apple problems. I'd like to think that we give them $99 a year times 30,000 people a year, but that's not their worry. I'd like to think that we're embracing their ecosystem and helping the world make good stuff, but that's not their theory. All they see is 500 apps a month come from this place all the time, and we got to deal with them. The reality of it is most of the apps that come from places like us are low quality. They just are. People show up, they make something lame, they make something dumb, they leave, they send it to Apple, and then Apple's burdened with that. It makes perfect sense. I'd be frustrated too, right? If I was burdened with tons of what I consider to be trash. So that's a huge reasonable thing that's a huge problem. That's a reasonable problem of theirs. So that's one thing. That's not to say that they don't get lots of junk from lots of developers from elsewhere. But if one place or two places or five places are a significant percentage of the junk, well, then you're going to have a little bit of an adversarial, conflict. So anyway, there's that. So the second reason that they're frustrated with people like us, when we get a little too aggressive or a little too disruptive, is they want the development process and flow to be a certain way. They want us to read all the technical documentation, become programmers, get Xcode, understand what outlets and actions are, write Objective-C, and now what's the new one called? I think the world already forgot. Swift, and go down this path. There's nothing wrong with that path, but it's unreasonable in my mind to force people down that path. So you have alternative concepts like we have, which says, hey, I'm a creative, I'm not a programmer, let's play and have fun and smile and download a project. There's nothing wrong with that. But they get a little butthurt when we let people have a big old Xcode project. And I don't blame them to some degree, but on the other degree, they need to worry about that. So there's in terms of all these little remarks, the $1 billion, what somebody said here, buy Buzztouch for $1 billion. Where is it?
Well,
yeah, that's a little bit of a neat thing to think about. But let me give you an example of how that fight would go down. We've all heard of Test Pilot, right? Test Pilot, perfect example. There's a part of the Apple process that sucks. Beta testing distributions of your app before it reaches the App Store, right? Go into the control panel, getting device IDs, all this crap we got to do. So a company like TestFlight shows up out of the woods and solves that problem, and Apple fights with them, yells at them, sends them threats, hates them. There's a big war, right? It goes on for a couple years. They become a big enough problem that they become bought by Apple, right? And now all of a sudden, Apple buys this little company, and who are we? Where are we as developers? We still can't use it. You go to the WWDC, you hang out, and they say, oh, test flight's coming, better beta test flight's coming. It's like, yeah, when? It was here before. You took it away, right? They have this way about them. So, no, Apple's not going to buy Buzztouch, Sharon. It's not going to happen. So there's a few reasons that it's not going to happen, but that's the least of our problems. And I can assure you that if it did happen, for some reason that we probably don't know yet, you'd be better off. That's just true. Because if you imagine Apple's resources in this kinds of concept, all of a sudden it's 1,000 times better, right? I want to do things like, and Apple gets pissed, right? I want to submit apps to Apple for you guys. They won't let me. I want to reject apps for Apple for you guys, for them, to save them the grief. They won't let me. Why not? Right? If you have this much volume and you have this much interest, Let's make the process better, save you a little bit of money, help us make better software, right? They won't do it. That's not how they roll. So that's just the way it is. Chris is saying, I just want 5 million developers buying all our plugins. However, we need to make that happen. Totally. Totally. There's 1,000 ways. Oh, one other technical talk. Forgot about this, and then we can keep talking about fun stuff. Plugins in Android and assets in Android, as we all know, do not need to be dragged into your project after you download it from your control panel. They're part of the project. We all know that. The iPhone side of things, we do have to drag our plugins into the control panel, and we do have to add our image resources and all of our stuff. Does this make sense? That's going away too. You won't have to do that anymore. And the reason for that is pretty simple, and it's something that I've been resisting for a long time, but I'm doing it anyway. Let me open up the core and show you why this is something I've been resisting. It sounds cheesy, but it's an important little nuance that not a lot of people understand. Xcode sometimes crashes GoToMeeting, or GoToMeeting sometimes crashes Xcode, so I'm not sure what we're going to get here. If you look at a typical iOS project, this is just an interesting little thing. I'm going to use some elementary terms on purpose. The folder on the left in the Explorer is yellow. Okay? It's yellow. But sometimes you'll see them that are blue. You may or may not know the difference. But it's a really important difference. If you added, let's say I go to this art folder right here, and I wanted to reveal this in Finder. Here it is in Finder. Okay? If I added another image to this directory in Finder on the actual file system, it would not show up in my Xcode project. Okay, I'll say that again. If I drag an image in Finder to my BT art folder, and I look in my Xcode project, it will not be there. Right? This is why we all have to add files to Xcode, because you're creating a file reference. And oftentimes we're copying the file, but that's a whole other conversation. But the point is it doesn't show up. If you have a file that looks like this, I'm going to go back to Finder here, a folder I should say. I'm going to make a new folder called Live Stuff. Okay? We'll call it Live Stuff. If I bring that folder into Xcode, BT Art, Live Stuff. Okay? You see how it's blue? That folder now, if I add something in Finder to that folder, let's add these files here in Live Stuff. See how they're already in Xcode now? I didn't have to add them to my project because I'm pointing to that folder with a pointer, which is different than a reference. The reason that that's important, let me delete this. And you'll notice it's gone in Finder also. The reason that's important is when we assemble your projects on our backend and we deliver to you the download, it's not as simple as just adding all your images to the image folder and adding all your plugins to the plugin folder and adding all your stuff to your project, because when you open it up in Xcode, they're not going to show up in Xcode. You still have to create that reference with that drag and drop BS. Well, that's because of the way that the folders are set up. These aren't actual folders. These are just groups, just a way to organize Xcode. It has nothing to do with Finder. So we're going to change these to pointers instead of references. They'll be blue instead of yellow. And now when you drag things into Finder or we deliver a download to you, it'll all be there like it's supposed to be. Right? It makes so much sense. The reason that I've been resisting that is pretty elementary, but I think it's important. You create a new project in Xcode, file, new iPhone app, you will not have pointers, you'll have references. They'll all be yellow. This is the way that most people do it. So by doing it the other way, we're doing it a little bit differently. And I don't necessarily like that idea, so I've been kind of resisting it. But it's to the point now where so many people don't know how to add files to Xcode that it sure would be nice to deliver them a project that was literally download and hit run and it just works, right? There's nothing you got to do. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. And so each of these little steps is significant in that goal, right? We just want to give you a project and have it compile and run. That's it. We don't want you to have to know about the control panel pictures and images and where they are, and just add a picture, upload the picture to the control panel if you want, give it a URL, whatever, and it's in your project. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the goal. So it's 2 o'clock. Will targets automatically assigned to .m and .a files that way? I think so, Chris. I think so. I think there's a setting in Xcode to do that. It's a fantastic question.
There were a couple questions that we missed that were really good questions. Okay. Now I can't find them, but okay. Oh, hey David, right now you can tweak apps to replace the top text screen with an image. Will BTGo be flexible in that manner as well?
Say that again, Sue. I'll try to understand what you're saying.
Okay. Hey David, right now you can tweak apps to replace the top text screen name with an image. Will BTGo be flexible in that manner as well?
Tweak the apps to replace the top text screen name. Okay, so let me restate this to make sure I understand. Maybe he's talking about the navigation bar title. Mm-hmm. Right now, the navigation bar title is a label, a UI label. Mm-hmm. The navigation bar in BT Central does allow for an image. Mm-hmm. It does allow for an image. Yes. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense.
I thought the question was more about...
it also allows for fonts, by the way. And when you're messing with the theme and the style, you can upload fonts. Mm-hmm. You can upload all that kind of stuff.
Oh, cool. There's one more here, too.
Hang on one sec, Sue. Chris is saying, can we have plugin size greater than 2 megabytes? It's not something I considered. It's not something I'm thinking about in the last few days or whatever. Dumb question. Is that the maximum we have on everybody right now? 2 megabytes?
I don't know.
On the market, I think so. Oh, on the market itself. I don't think there'd be any reason why we couldn't. And off the top of my head, I can't think about why we would have imposed that limit. Maybe we imposed it in the early days when we were letting everybody self-upload stuff and then we didn't change it or whatever. Yeah, Chris, if you've got a bigger one or whatever. Remember I said here, remember on assets where we have, this is an important concept here. Remember on assets where you have this person, David Book, that's logged in, can only upload files that are 10 megabytes each. We also have, for the first time in the database now, we've separated this user by user instead of globally. The maximum file upload size and the maximum, in essence, storage size. Think Dropbox, right? How much stuff can you put in your Buzztouch control panel? We kind of did that for self-hosters more than ourselves, but we're going to take advantage on ourselves. So I think that should be married to that. So if you've got big plugins, I think it should be married to your personal max upload size. And so the thing is, with people like you, everybody in this meeting, we don't have issues like this. All these limits and all these things are designed to protect us against the people that we don't know. So if we know you, then yeah, it makes sense now with this new design. We can go to Chris's record and Chris's profile and say, yeah, Chris can upload big stuff, right? That kind of thinking, because we know Chris gets it, or we know Kit's. Again, that's the idea. Everything's been so global up to this point, and just so almost out of control. Like we're really trying to regroup this thing and get it going. Yeah, so Sue, back to some of those other questions.
Yeah, the other question was from Smug, and I keep losing it, so I can't read it exactly, but it had to do with, if I'm making an app now, what should I do differently for making my app now, or should I hold off and wait for something new?
No, I wouldn't hold off. I think just keep doing the best you can do. There's not that big of a difference in terms of the core. I don't think you're gonna be like disappointed or anything that you started.
I think I just would run two servers for a while,
I don't
right?
even think you need another machine, just a different directory.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Just a different directory.
Hmm.
Um, I'm gonna throw this out for Smug because I know he's on here and I haven't seen my email. Smug, did you get my email last night at 2 o'clock in the morning? And did that work? Just give me a thumbs up or a smile or a sad face or whatever. What a pain in the ass that was.
Oh, yeah, you're gonna have to redo your app copier tool, Chris. Yeah, I bet.
Got it. Oh, so Chris, your app copier creator tool, I haven't played with that enough to know if it's going to be obsolete or whatever. I think the answer is no, and I can say that confidently with an asterisk. Even though BT Central will allow you to import and export, there's a few caveats with that. One is that's only going to be for people who pay, right? What we now call members. That's an important thing. None of this freebie stuff. Basically self-hosted people, right? Two is no matter how cool it works, we should just make yours better. Right? Whatever yours does, let's just make it do something better. So obsolete's kind of an interesting question. I think we need to obviously be sensitive to that kind of stuff. And you made it and it works. And is that something you sell or is that something you give away? It's on the market. Okay, then yeah, we need to make it badass. We need to make it badass. And you and I can get together and figure that out. We certainly don't want to obsolete people's stuff. Maybe it does something with the older things, or I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. We'll go with that.